This is Rising Above Part 2, and I actually finished everything, but for whatever reason the volume didn't turn out very well, so I'm going to be recording this all over again. No problem. Here we go. So from where I left off, um, we had rented out an Airbnb. We're living there for quite a few months. I was able to get myself a pretty decent job, work our way out of that situation, and I was able to find a place to live up in Riverside County with my family. Bought a decent house so that we all had a place to stay and start the healing process. Um, and it was good. It sometimes you don't realize kind of what you've been through until you stop. It's funny. You always hear the story when people work all their life and then they finally get a chance to retire and then they slow down a little bit and that's when they have a heart attack and die. And I experienced that, in different ways. I was able to kind of slow down and gain insight on everything that had happened. And I think that's kind of when a lot of shock also happened, looking back. Not to say that it had stopped in a lot of different ways. It was definitely still happening. So, um, from that point, there were still numerous court cases, different battles that we were trying to fight on every front. And like I explained before, pretty much all of our lawyers were saying this is an uphill battle. It's really not going to happen for you, and you just don't have the funding and the backing and all these different things in your favor. So it's not to say that I gave up, but I started realizing more so the reality of the situation and just started to decide more of a directional path of healing as opposed to the fighting. And I think there's the same thing with my mother as well. Um, Although there was definitely some peaks and valleys to even being able to situate ourselves in a place to stay. I definitely hit rock bottom a couple different times, and I'll tell you a story. In the midst of all of this, one of the things that really affected me. So, went out with my mother one day. We had a really long court case, and it lasted most all day. And then at the end of the day, we went out and had a couple beers, and it led to a couple more beers, and we started getting a little tipsy, and I could tell my mom was holding a lot of stuff back from me, and she was just like wanting, like, she just needed to vomit information on me of so many different things that she had been maybe holding back for months and years and all kinds of stuff. So she just really opened up, which I guess was good for her, not so good for me. And she told me numerous stories where my father had raped my mom on many different occasions. And in a way, it shocked me, but at the same time, I also, throughout my childhood, looking back, could see different situations where I could tell she was absolutely destroyed for, a week here, a week there. And I knew something was wrong even when I was a kid, but she'd either mask it, hide it, and I always knew they had like a very tumultuous relationship, so I knew maybe something had happened, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. So when she told me these, in a couple different situations in detail, it was really hard for me to digest, process, come to understand, the depth of how messed up my father actually was on a whole nother level. Not to say that I knew that it went deeper, but I didn't know exactly how deep. So that was really hard for me, um, to take that in. And of course, when she said it, it took a long time for me to process those different stories that she had told me. Because looking back, I could tell there was different moments in my life that had happened. On top of that, she also told me that my best friend at the time was also kind of going behind my back and sleeping with my sister. And so that was also another thing that was extremely hard. I had started a business with this person, Kula Corp, at the time, and I think it was really hard for me. First of all, this guy being my best friend, and second of all, you know, having such in depth conversation about transparency and compassion and what it really means to be somebody's friend on that level, on a reciprocal relationship with somebody as a man, on that deeper level of kinship and transcending, all different types of things. And to know that, basically this guy was coming to see me, and on the side he was actually sleeping with my sister, and then kind of hiding it from me, and then telling me, we have such a transparent relationship and everything like that. That was definitely, the straw on the camel's back, so to speak. I remember a couple days after hearing, a lot of that information, my brain and soul almost seem to not be able to handle it. I think that there was a couple moments like I completely shut down. I could feel it on such a deep level that it was enlightening, but also you could scrape the bottom of the barrel. I guess I'm trying to think of like certain terminology that would work for how I felt in those moments, but I felt like, it wasn't just hitting rock bottom. It was like, somebody slamming you against the bottom like multiple times, and there was nothing deeper than that. So it was really hard. It was a good couple of weeks of trying to process all this stuff and really understand what value it had in moving forward in trusting people, and knowing that I had grown up in such a mirage of abuse, not only from my dad but my mom, for sticking around with that, knowing that she was with somebody that could do such horrible things. I also feel like is another way of, absolute child abuse on both parties. Excuse me. So there was that. Um, on top of that, I could see that my mom, really was reeling from everything that had happened. Had moments where she was able to just kind of calm down and figure out stuff, but at that point, she was drinking so heavily, and then, taking prescription drugs herself for the pain, that she had, at a certain point, tried to commit suicide. And so I was so incapacitated, so passive, that I almost didn't believe it in a sense. And it was really scary because looking back, it's so shocking to think that I was so numb to the whole situation that my mom could have died, and I wasn't even aware of what was happening around me. And so that had happened, and I guess that one was more minor until the second one. She tried to commit suicide again through overdosing of prescription drugs. At that point, that one was a little bit more realistic for me because she had sent me kind of a death note, if you will, or a letter, and then tried, and then we had to um, have her stomach pumped and then sent to, an institution where she was, given more drugs. Of course, that's what they do to kind of numb you to your state in which you're trying to deal with. And she was there for a couple of weeks. So, in the midst of all this, there's obviously still the struggles of everything going on. And at which point, I think things got so low that I had a talk with my lawyers, and I basically told them, like, I don't have it in me anymore to fight this battle. I just can't do it. I need to start taking the stepping stones to healing and figuring out what I need to do best for myself and my family, because I was so numb to the situation. And at which point, I had lost my best friend, wasn't really talking to him. Everybody around me, family, wanted, absolutely nothing to do with us. Didn't really have much of a support system in any direction. So it was kind of like, what do I need to do for myself? And it really teaches you a lot. In those moments, you realize that you can't really rely on anybody but yourself to make those really tough decisions on deciding to heal and move forward for yourself and your family and the people that are, in your close circle. So that's kind of what I did. I made those tough decisions to say, look, talking to my lawyers and saying, I don't really have much more in me to fight on this battlefront. And they told me, they said, well, look, you can fight this thing for, a couple of years, and, your dad's going to drag it out. And he has the capability and the money to do so. So you have a good chance of winning, but this is going to be a long haul before you get anywhere. I just said, I can't do it. On top, I forgot to mention too, COVID's still happening, and the court system is just starting to get back in place to start taking care of certain things. But in doing so, they had, within San Diego at least, thousands of cases they had to kind of catch up to. So they said, you're part of all that, and it's going to obviously take a long time before we even get around to you, because a lot of shit's gone down, within the past year. So that being said, I spoke with them and I said, look, I'd like to settle. And then at which point my mom was kind of out of the hospital, and was able to talk to her a little bit about what was going on. All right, so spoke with my lawyers, our lawyers, and talked to them and kind of got my mom on the same page. And we all agreed that we were going to settle. Came up with a date, sat in front of a judge. And really there was no budging on his side. He didn't want to settle for anything. He wanted to, my father wanted to fight this thing tooth and nail, all the way down to the nitty gritty, as long as it took. And I kind of knew deep in my soul, like, this was like the final blow, if you will. I think on a spiritual level, it was kind of like the end of the war, and I was kind of laying down my sword, if you will, not to necessarily give up. In a weird way, I feel like I had won in so many different ways, spiritually, emotionally, and the roller coaster of everything that had happened. And I had a feeling in some way, shape, or form that I'd achieved some level of greatness, though I knew I didn't feel it then in my body or in my mind, but I just knew that that was kind of the end. And so we decided to settle, and I basically told my lawyers, I'm like, look, or I told the lawyer, judge, I was like, I don't really want anything out of this situation anymore. Like, if anything, I just want my lawyers to get paid and for me to just move on with my life. My mom got a mild, like a really small settlement, mostly from the actual judge fighting for her in different ways to make sure that she got something from the situation. And it was so funny because, well, actually, I wouldn't consider it funny, but it felt like the end of something, like almost like closing a chapter, if you will, in that moment, and just surrendering to whatever it was that had happened through all of that time. And it wasn't soon after that, my dad actually did one of his usual things, though I think it was more so my dad also, in a weird way, spiritually committing suicide. And he took a bunch of drugs and went surfing and overdosed. So this was, shortly after this. And so he was in the hospital. He was rushed to the hospital. He had multiple seizures, and at some point, uh, my sister, who was kind of in charge at that point, because he had put her kind of in charge of that situation, pulled the plug. And it was funny because there was one point where I even wanted to go see my father in the hospital, and my sister told me she wasn't comfortable me going to visit him before he died. And legally, because he had a restraining order against me, there was worry in the back of my head, knowing my sister, and also the complications within the legal ramifications of my dad, that she might try and do something to me and or directly affect me and my family. So at that point, I was worried about going to see him before he had passed away. So he passed away, and I didn't get to go see him. And at first it was extremely traumatic, but it didn't really stop there. There's a perpetuation of different things that happened after that. Like, my sister at one point cremated my father and spread his ashes without me knowing. I don't know where to this day, but that was also, something that really affected me. Okay, where was I? So yeah, my sister had cremated my father and spread his ashes without me knowing. And so there was just little barbs of like moments that just really affected me and gave me, really injected a lot of like spite and anger, throughout all this situational stuff. And it just kept on kind of flowing. I almost feel like it was a weird test. Like I was able to access like a ton of information too, like after he passed, from my lawyer, to basically see so much of like what was going on behind the scenes of, my dad paying so many different people, my mom's sister, my mother's my mother's mother, who is deceased, her ex-boyfriend. My dad was paying his rent. My dad had paid off so many of my sister's friends to write horrible things about us, and the list went on and on and on and on. So it just felt like wave after wave of like information. Even when my dad passed, like I couldn't fully grieve, because it just felt like, with my sister pulling all these different moves, um, it just seemed to not stop. And then, finding out that my dad had changed the will last minute to basically say that, my sister was getting everything. My dad had always told me that everything that I'd been working for my entire life was going to go to me, and the will said as much. Um, you know, and so when that was changed, also just another barb in my side for everything that was kind of happening, and then coming to find out, months later, that my sister wasn't going to give my mom or myself a penny of anything. And we're talking, upwards of $30 million, nothing. So yeah, the grieving process was not the easiest thing to do. And though I felt a lot of different emotions of information coming my way about it, my heart, my brain kind of telling me what was going on externally, it was really hard to succumb to the emotions that I was presented with. If anything, I think a lot of it was more anger than sadness, which sucked at the time, because I knew deep down inside it, I wanted to grieve. I wanted to confront those different emotions for grieving, but I felt so numb to all of it. So when, I come to find out, obviously everything that I had been working for many years, I wasn't going to get a penny of. When I come to find out that I didn't even get to share in the release, of my father's ashes, nor did I get to see him before he passed, I think that there was a lot of anger in that, and displaced anger too, because I, in a lot of different ways, like, I wanted to hone my focus on all these different people that had hurt me. But at the time, like, I had come so far, it made me realize that in all of that anger, I was really hurting myself. And I just had almost no more anger to give, in a weird way. I had run out of my spite towards all these different people. And I knew that if I continued down that path, I was only going to start more mentally abusing myself. And I was already doing so in many different ways. I was drinking heavily. I wasn't taking care of myself as well as I should. Physically, emotionally, especially. I think, if anything, emotionally, I was distraught every single day, fighting, clawing and scraping to find some level of happiness every day, so that I could go to work and do what I needed to. But I knew deep down inside that I had to start taking the steps emotionally to get back to where I needed to be the man that I needed to be for myself and my family. And I knew that the only way to do that was what I did, which is basically surrendering to the experience. And I did that. And it was, at the time, I didn't really understood what I had done, but it was so powerful. And it gave me kind of the redirection that I needed in order to grow and become more of who I am. And so, if anything, it taught me that, at some point when you're going through all this stuff, it will end. To all the people out there listening, when you're going through this heartache and suffering and it feels like the abuse just never seems to end, it'll end, you know, it'll end one of these days. You'll get through it. And sometimes it might take a week, month, year, years, but at some point it all does end, even if it comes to, death, which is a silly word. I believe more of a transition into something more beautiful. And even if it comes to that, I think that's also, something to even look forward to in the midst of all the craziness that you're dealing with. And I know that can be a hard thing to wrap your head around, but it is the truth of things. And before I sat down today, I was thinking about different things that I was thinking about when I was going through these different experiences. And I had to come up with different theoretical ways of approaching my emotions. And I've always been a big fan of alchemy. And this is something that worked for me. I truly believe that when you set your attention to certain ideas, they are able to help you along the way with manifesting what it is that you're wanting to do. And I know that was a jumble of words right there, but what I did at a certain point, and I think towards the beginning, middle, is I told myself there was kind of no way around having to deal with that, having to deal with all this. And I knew that it was either move forward and be successful at everything that you're going to try and do, or fail and die and just give up already and walk away. And, and I knew that really wasn't any alternative for the situation, nor is it who I am whatsoever. So I knew that I had to make better decisions in the way I sought out energetically how I was going to deal with this stuff. So I knew that I had to take all the anger and spite and maybe, even a lot of the energy coming my way, and I had to morph that energy into something else other than what it was. And for me, eventually, what it kind of became was kind of coal on the fire to me. I feel in a weird way that all that spite and anger and energy that was coming my way was actually fueling the fire that drove me to not only become a better person, but to learn what it takes to get through these types of situations, so that I knew someday when I had to deal with other things, hopefully not like this, but maybe in a business sense, when I had to overcome, very hard situational awareness stuff, that I would be able to get through it knowing that I've done it before in different ways. And I felt like all the doubt, and even to this day, like it's given me so much aspiration for moving forward in many different dynamics, is that, when I hear doubt, or, when people tell me I can't do it, or when I can feel it, or, when people shoot anger my way or try to fuck me over one way or another, which happens in business quite a bit, it's fuel to me at this point. I've been able to allow that stuff to morph into something other than what it is. And now it's become something different to me, and I see it differently as well. And I see those words differently and that energy differently. Though I don't try and attract it, obviously I don't put it out there. But if it does come my way, I use that as fuel to drive me forward, knowing that it's gonna give me what I need to get to the next level of who I am. And so, anybody out there that's dealing with hardship and all these different things, I think that's a tool that you can definitely use for yourself. Is that you can put on those rose glasses and you can change your perspective on what you think things may be, because everybody's reality is so different. You're your own unique person. You have your own perspective. You create what it is you want to see and how you see it, and therefore you have the capability of changing the world around you that suits how you should see it. Therefore, anything negative or anything that's happening to you, you have the capability of morphing those situational experiences into how you want them to be, how they actually feed into your body. And so I was able to do that, and it helped me so greatly in my motivation for who I am now and helping other people. And then also everything that I've been through, knowing that I will continue to experience things that are hard in all different ways. But it's the way that I've learned to approach those experiences have helped me so greatly move mountains, and what I know that I'm capable of doing, not only for my own success now, for myself and my family and everybody around me, but also to share these very difficult experiences with you, the viewers, to know that I am a human being and I've gone through some shit, and I've shared a little bit of insight of who I am and some of the stuff that I've gone through, and I've been able to rise above all of this and become more of who I've wanted to be in my life and become the person that I cherish and love, and look as a unique human being, always trying to figure it out, because every day we're trying to figure something out. We're trying to figure out what it is that's going on in our microcosm of the universe, and also the macro of everything else that's happening around us every day. And sometimes it can be a lot. But I assure you, when you set the intention of what you're wanting every single day and you seek it out and you don't let anything stop you, and all the negativity that's out there of what people are going to say about you and this, that, and the other, you're able to use that energy and you're able to change it, and you're able to guide yourself down the pathway that you choose and how you see fit to get you to your goals and what you're wanting to do in your life. So, that being said, thank you so much for listening to all of this. I know it was a lot, but I hope that you gained some insight from not only me as a human being and what I've been through, but also, through all the different videos that you're going to hopefully watch me talk about. You're going to see that I'm going to share a lot of different concepts and ideas through my own experiences and how they've gotten to me. They've gotten me to what I consider a very successful place within the inside and outside realms of who I am and who I'm constantly striving to be. So thank you so much.